She was 79 years old and had done all this work on herself. And I remember her saying, "This is so great. I'm going to start using this on all my issues." I was like, wait. Louise Hay, the queen of self-help, still has issues at 79? Like, I was like, we're all doomed then.
You're watching the Wow podcast. I'm Jennifer Robin. This conversation is for informational purposes only and is not medical advice. Full disclosure is in the description. Today on the show, we have Allison Jayne. She's a seasoned psychotherapist, EFT tapping practitioner, and author. And today, we're going to talk about the science behind EFT and explore themes from Allison's book, Find Love Again, Learn to Date Like a Goddess. Welcome, Allison.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I absolutely love chatting with other EFT practitioners. How do you explain to someone who has no idea what EFT tapping is? I'm curious what words you use.
It's a combination of tapping on one's own acupressure points while processing emotionally laden material, stressful memories, or intense emotions.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, I like to add the tapping on themselves because an amazing amount of people think I tap on other people. And so I kind of put that right in the definition.
Yeah, that's good. I think when I first started, it was not as commonplace as it is now.
There was like nobody knew what this thing was that I was doing at that time. Yeah. So now
that's
it's
true.
exciting.
It's come a long way since then. So
it
at
really
least people have heard of it and heard of things like it and know what like acupressure and the points and because it's used in so many other modalities. I think people are becoming more aware. Yeah.
Right. And people are embracing different kinds of treatments, so that I think has really just opened the space up for something like this.
Yeah, absolutely. I read that you used EFT tapping to help your son. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. So my story actually begins with a lack of CEUs, which for anyone who doesn't know is continuing education units. So I had just kind of gotten to a point where I was a little bit in the weeds. I needed a lot of CEUs in a short period of time. And I was interested in mind-body techniques already at that point. I had done some progressive muscle relaxation and stuff with my clients. So I knew I wanted to get trained something along those lines. And so I just looked up what's going on in the Chicago area. I was interested in EMDR. For people who don't know that, that's eye movement reprocessing technique that is similar to EFT. And I was interested in EFT. But the EFT training was the one in the area. And it was the only one in the Midwest, in the Chicago area. I was like, great, I'll sign up. I signed up, and lo and behold, not only was it in the Chicago area, it was at a hotel a mile up the street from my house, which was just like crazy. So I went on day one, not really knowing what to expect. And she was talking about how EFT works amazingly well on children. And my son was 7 at the time. And he had this intense fear of the dark. He could not be, if the sun started to set, he would run and just be clinging to my leg, So I thought, well, I'm going to go home tonight. It was a 2-day training. I'm going to go home tonight and try this on him. So I went home that night. We started tapping. And this is a little bit nuanced, but sort of interesting part of the story is we started tapping and he got more and more comfortable going into a darker and darker space. We were sort of doing this in my basement, and then you want to always test EFT, right? Test to see if it works. So I said, okay, now you're going to go deep into the dark part of the basement and see if you can do that. And he took several steps in. So that was like a miracle in and of itself. But then he came running out and he said, I'm afraid something's going to pop out at me. So I went to class the next day and I kind of said to my teacher, like, it didn't work. We tried, it looked like it was working, but then, he came running back and said he was afraid someone was going to pop out at him. And so she said, well, that's another aspect. So I don't know how much you've maybe talked already on the show about aspects, but they're really important. And I think to me, it was like such a good lesson because I learned right away that, if your problem is like a table, there's all these legs holding it in place, right? So you want to knock them out one at a time. So I realized I had gotten rid of a lot of the fear of the dark. She said, but did you tap on that surprise of being spooked or having something pop out. I said, oh no, I didn't. I'm going to go home and try that tonight. So I went home that night and it was already getting dark and I couldn't find him anywhere. And I'm looking all over the house and I go upstairs and he's in his room. It is now fully dark, just playing with his toys. And I was like, mind blown. I mean, I could not believe this kid would have never done that before. And from that day on, not only did we not have to go back and tap on the popping out, because kids, I think in general take, clear things way quicker. But he also was no longer afraid of going in the basement. He used to not even go in the basement during the daylight by himself, right? So he was never afraid to go in the basement again. We didn't even tap on that, but we did do the tapping in the basement. So I think for me, what I learned from all of this was it works. It's very powerful. My son is now 19. Just anyone wants to know, his fear of the dark never came back. And it's very powerful and it is interesting, the associations that the brain makes. And that's what I love about it. It's almost like detective work. I have to sometimes figure out what is connected to what. So for him, his fear of the dark was connected to his fear of the basement. And once we cleared one, the other cleared. And I've seen dozens and dozens of examples similar with working with my clients over time where things are connected in a way that you don't always anticipate.
Yeah. And that's fantastic that it cleared so quickly. Because I know with adults, sometimes you may make progress, but it takes more tap. Like you have to tap again, especially I find when people are doing it by themselves. Like without a practitioner, sometimes it can take a little bit longer. And I think that's because, like you said, you're putting together the connected core belief that maybe the person isn't even aware of, right?
Exactly. Like I have another great example of that where I was working with someone, this is just honestly just a friend that I was practicing it, and she had this sort of irrational fear of rats. Not irrational because I mean they are kind of creepy, but like she really was worried about it in the city, walking around, So I said, let's try this. Let's tap on it, and it wasn't shifting. And we tried a bunch of different, I tried different aspects. It wasn't shifting, and so then I just said to myself, or I said to her, really, I said, okay, let's just play around with associations, like a rat. Like what could a rat symbolize for you? Like to me, a rat is like someone who's a betrayer. And she just burst into tears.
Oh.
And there were two big betrayals in her life.
Mm-hmm.
And once she tapped on those, fear of rats gone.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
And when you say the bursting into tears, I've mentioned before on the show that I think what surprised me the most when I started working with people is how even just the setup statement, I'm not sure what you say, but a lot of times I'll say, even though blah, 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 I love and respect myself. And I have had so many people that can't say that statement. And then we have to start there with the self-love.
Right.
But I was not expecting that. How many people cannot say
Right.
they tear up,
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, absolutely. I love and accept myself typically, but yeah, totally. It's an issue. And sometimes I'll even back up and do, even though I'm feeling so and so, I accept that I have this feeling. Because some people, that's where they can start. Only there. Just okay, I can accept that I have this feeling. Some people don't want to accept they have this feeling, but they can. But yeah, to go on to love and accept themselves is a big statement. And I do say to people, it's really okay if that doesn't feel true right now, because that is what the tapping does. It will make it feel true over time. But a lot of times it doesn't in the beginning. But I agree. I've taught classes where people burst into tears very quickly. It really raises the emotions to the surface very, very quickly, which has always been to me a sign of just exactly how powerful it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the calm that pretty much everybody has by the end of it. Almost like sleepy sometimes.
Right, exactly. And we'll talk about that when we get to the science. I can explain that. Yeah, exactly. And I always tell people the biggest thing is just to keep tapping through it. If you stop, when the emotions come up and you stop, which some people will, and I think this is where people struggle when they do it on their own.
Yeah.
Because emotions come up, you get distracted by that emotional wave and you stop tapping. I always say the most important thing is just tap all the way through it and really 10, maybe 15 minutes at the most
Yeah,
before people get relief. A lot of times it's 3 to 5 minutes before people get relief. So you just have to persist with it. And then eventually it feels like the emotions just sort of evaporate out of your body. It's a weird feeling,
it
right?
is.
But
It
it's a
is.
cool feeling.
Yeah. And we should say also, before we go further, that if you have like a deep trauma or a really, really big issue, like, say, you're dealing with child abuse when you were a child, or rape, or murder, or I don't know, something horrible like that,
Mhm.
those are not the things you want to tap on by yourself. So I'm just going to
Right,
put that out there. You want to
right.
work with a professional for trauma.
Yes, 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 exactly. That's primarily what I do is I work with women who have had
Hmm.
mostly who have had some trauma stuff. And I was always a trauma therapist. That's what I did before EFT, but now I found this is so much more powerful than to me than cognitive behavioral therapy that I used to do. I get much better results, let's put it that way, with my clients.
Yeah.
And
And it's nice that you can mesh that with your professional training as well. So
yeah,
you can
yeah.
go even deeper with trauma than
Right.
maybe just Joe Schmo EFT tapping practitioner, but
Yes.
right?
Hopefully, yes,
Because you can
yes.
keep them safe. And that's
Right.
friends, that's what we're getting at here is,
Mhm.
everything we talk about, we want to make sure you're doing it with your own safety in mind.
Yeah,
So,
exactly, exactly. And I always say to my clients, it's great to have it as a tool
mhm.
in your toolbox for, you know, when you are frustrated, when you are mad, tap when you're venting on the phone to a friend or when you're in the shower perseverating on your problems. But yeah, if you want to do the deep sort of unclearing, even honestly, even like a phobia or even, another, these are sort of some of my early experiences where it didn't go so great was because I really didn't realize how powerful it was right at first. And I had a friend who had a nail biting issue and she said, "Oh, can you help me with that?" And I said, "Yeah, I think so. They say it works for like urges and addictions. Let's try it." So we were doing it and she got very emotional very quickly. Now she's psychologically, uh, intact person. I don't know. I know her well enough to know that she had a lot of psychological reserves, and so I wasn't super alarmed when she got that emotional, but I was surprised and I was taken back. And she told me the next day it lasted for like a good 24 hours. She said I was really weepy, and I started remembering my sister and how she used to play with my nails, and just a lot came up for her on
Mhm.
just even though I have this urge to bite my nails. I mean, that's
Yeah.
all we did for maybe
Yeah.
15 minutes and it stirred up a lot. So that's the other thing I always say to people is don't start tapping right before you have a long work day or before you're going to a meeting or if you are thinking about something that's bothering you and you start tapping on it, you could open some emotional floodgates that you just want to make sure you do it at a safe time as well and
Yeah.
where you can have some compassion for yourself afterwards if tears come up.
Absolutely. And I think that's because in many times it's hitting on these hidden these things that we've buried and pushed down, and sometimes one issue brings up a whole can of worms that we didn't even
Right.
know were there, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Let's get into the science a little bit. So what is actually going on in our body, in our brain as we're tapping?
There's actually a really great article that just came out this month by David Feinstein. It's basically a comprehensive overview of the research to this point, but he also talks about the mechanisms that we've all theorized,
Mhm.
all this time, but I thought it was really super helpful that he's kind of pulled it all together. Basically, what's happening is because you're tapping on these particular acupressure points, you're sending a calming signal to the fight or flight part of your brain, the amygdala. And that is the part that is our alert system that tells us we either need to fight, flee, or freeze. And anytime you've been in any kind of stressful situation, that's your amygdala turning on. So when you've wanted to walk out the door with a fight with your spouse, or you've kind of frozen when your boss asks you a question that you can't answer, or you just start getting really angry and kind of feel like your blood boiling, those are all your amygdala going off. And so when you tap, because tapping these particular acupressure points does have a calming effect on the body, which we'll talk about in a second, biologically, biochemically it does, you cannot sustain staying in that activated amygdala state and getting this input to your body that's telling your body to relax at the same time. And so that's why it's really key to keep tapping, because one will win out over the other, and you want it to be the calming part of your brain. So, and then what's really interesting is when the amygdala gets quieted, what we're also finding is that the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain responsible for logic and reasoning and good judgment, that kind of goes back online. So what a lot of people don't know is when we go into fight, flight, or freeze, the blood from our frontal lobe gets constricted to our mid and hindbrain. So it's midbrain is the emotion centers. So that's why you feel really angry or scared or intense emotions. And then the hindbrain is the amygdala, right? So it flows that way, it constricts that way. And that was survivalistic, because if you were facing a saber-toothed tiger, you had to run or hide and freeze, right? Or fight it. So you had to do one of those things, and you couldn't sit there in logic and go, well, should I fight this tiger? Shouldn't I? Right? I mean, if you did, you were dead. So
you were dinner.
Right, exactly. So our genetic history comes from people who were the survivors, and the survivors had this mechanism where the blood, kind of drains from your frontal lobe, and it also drains from your extremities. That's why your hands get cold, your feet get cold. It all goes in the center. It's your heart, your lung, and that mid and hindbrain. That's what needs the blood pumping in an emergency. Unfortunately, in our society today, your boss getting upset with you can feel biologically to your body like an emergency and can bring on all these things. And that's why when you're put on the spot, you can't come up with the answer, because guess what? There's no more blood flowing here. It's all constricted. And so you can't think. And so when you do the tapping and you calm down, the blood flow goes back out, is what we found on brain scans. And what I notice, I'm sure you've noticed too, just in working with clients, is ideas come back. Insights drop in. And usually because you've cleared this intense emotion, it can be some really good insights, some really big insights, some huge aha moments. It's like, oh, the reason I've been doing this or feeling this way or thinking that is because of this. And so that's, I think, one of the most fun parts, is just the new insight, the new thoughts that people can have. And sometimes what's really interesting, because the theory is that completely new neural pathways are created, right?
Yeah.
And so I will also see that sometimes people will say, well, that thing came to you about, actually it's not that big a deal. Because once you move it from your mid to your frontal lobe, it isn't that big a deal. But someone I was working with on a fear of spiders, and
I did that one too. Yeah.
Yeah, it was big. It was a big one,
Yep.
But the initial round, her response after just a couple rounds was to say, well, I mean, it's not like little spiders like that one. There happened to be one like on the ceiling. She's like, it's not like little spiders like that one that bothers me. It's just the big ones. And her husband was behind her going, no, it was the little ones. Trust me, this is a miracle. I can't believe it. I mean, because she was really like frozen around this. So it was interesting though, because her brain adopted a new paradigm that was like, no, not little spiders, even though it clearly had been. Little spiders even.
Yeah. I remember the case so well, because it was one of my very, very first ones, like almost right after I got certified, and I'm chatting with this person and tapping through the points. And I think she must have seen a scary movie or something when she was little. And it was about, they're going to lay eggs under my skin.
Oh.
And I can't remember, because gosh, it's been years, but I said something funny about that and how silly it was or whatever. And she was laughing by the end of it. And then she ended up like, oh yeah, I don't know why I think that, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And it just went away.
Yeah.
Now I will preface it and to say, it's not like these people are then wanting to, go get a tarantula for a pet.
Right.
I don't love spiders. It just means they can be in the room with one and not freak out.
Right.
Right. Which is progress.
Right. Which is progress. Right.
Interesting.
And, I mean, honestly, I've seen when I've worked on like fear of heights, things like that, I worked with someone who was going on a trip with her family. They were going on like the world's longest tram, and I think it was Armenia, and she was terrified. She was so terrified. She showed me a picture and her hand was shaking, and she's like, they want to go on this. And I mean, we did one session And she went on it and enjoyed it. She came back and told me it was great. It was so fun. So, she was like really, really over it. So
Yeah.
I think a lot of times it does depend on what the roots are, like we
Yeah.
were saying, like how far back. If it's childhood root, that could be
Mm-hmm.
a big thing. And just some other factors too. Like if it's
Well,
not
how
like a
many legs to
newer
the table,
fear.
right? So you got to
Exactly.
get them all. So if you're only
Yes,
dealing with one, they're still going to have a problem.
exactly. Yeah.
Ever listen to a podcast with great content but wish the audio quality was better? Even with expensive equipment, audio recordings pick up everything. Appliance hums, barking dogs, notification beeps, and when listeners are wearing headphones, they hear all of it. Excessive ums and repetitive words can be really irritating too. Would you rather hear audio like this?
No matter how much somebody cares and how well-meaning they are,
Or polished like this?
no matter how much somebody cares and how well-meaning they are,
Every podcast deserves the spa treatment. With balanced audio levels and distractions removed, you can hear the difference immediately. Know a podcaster who'd appreciate a fresh perspective? I offer free podcast consultations where I share specific ideas to improve their show. Send them to podcastspa.com. That's podcastspa.com. Your referrals help support this show. I appreciate you. You want to talk at all about recent research? You mentioned that paper that just came out. I have not read that yet, but I am familiar with the author.
Sure. Yeah. The really interesting thing, especially for me being in this field now for 11 years doing this work, just to see the science back up what we knew was working. So it's an interesting field because it sort of was something that came along where it was like, well, this discovery was made that tapping on these acupressure points is really helping people, really clearing up phobias, anxiety, PTSD. And we're not totally sure why. And then some of the theories came along, and now the science has gone back and proved it. So they have done many brain studies that show that what happens when you start tapping on these particular acupressure points. By the way, there are also dismantling studies that have taken the methodology apart and seen, is it just the talking about it and the focusing? Is it just some of the acupressure points? Is it just tapping anywhere on your body? People ask me that all the time. And the dismantling studies are very clear. No, it is these particular points that are tapping on these particular points are the effective mechanism of the technique. Another one with these brain scans is what it shows is that it very quickly moves people into an alpha brainwave state. We are awake and functioning in our beta brain. That's where we go and that's where we hang out every day, right? And then as we start to relax and unwind, we move into alpha. And then that's kind of like, I always say, like if you do yoga, shavasana, or if you meditate, that's your alpha brainwave state. It's a little bit woozy, a little bit dreamy. And then you move into that real, like sort of half awake, half asleep, where you're kind of dreaming, but kind of awake. That's theta. And then you move into delta. Most people are familiar with delta, right? That's sleep. So what's very interesting is that because the tapping moves us into an alpha brainwave state, that is why people do report feeling very sleepy, very tired, because most of us really only go into alpha on our way to sleep. So it's great and healthy for us to hang out in alpha. Like it is like when our body does cell repair work, when it produces DHEA and all those good human growth hormones. So it's great for us to spend time in alpha. And that's partly why you're seeing all the studies come out about meditation and how good it is for you, yoga, how good it is for you. But just know that tapping can get those same results because you're spending more time in alpha. And what I try to tell my clients is, I know at the end of the session, you're going to feel sleepy, but just give it like 20 minutes at most and your energy will rebound big. And they then report to me, yeah, that is what happened. And it's not necessarily that you are sleepy in alpha. It's just that your brain associates alpha brainwave state with sleep.
Right.
So once you start to get used to that and to start to understand, okay, this like chill feeling, I can have it and not go right to sleep afterwards. And it's great. And that's over time that really, really, really is going to regulate your system in a way that you won't even believe. So that's one really cool thing about it. But even predated to some of those studies have been studies where they look at saliva samples and blood samples pre and post. And what they've really found very remarkably, is a very significant drop in cortisol levels. That's our stress hormone that puts on belly fat. And it has been shown to increase our immune system, to boost your immunoglobulin production. Really recently, there's been studies looking at genetic sequencing and turning on and off of genes, and the upregulation and deregulation that they found in these genes are associated with really positive clinical outcomes. So it's pretty fascinating, and it's very helpful, I think, to know this, because it doesn't really matter so much what you're saying as much as doing it, making a practice out of it. That's going to regulate your body over time. That's going to help your body to repair itself, especially for people who kind of function sort of baseline anxiety or in a hyperarousal state a lot. It's going to move them out of that just biochemically by saying nothing at all. You could just tap and breathe, and you're doing your body a world of good.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite emergency point that you use with clients? I know it's more effective when we do it all. Something they can just touch. If they're
Right.
like sitting at their desk in work and they're not going to go
Yes.
through the whole thing,
Yes.
what's your go-to point for that?
Just squeezing on either side of your nail bed, squeezing
Mhm.
in towards the middle. And you can go through one hand and the other, and pretty quickly you'll get that alpha brainwave feeling. And that's a great one because you can do it under a desk.
Yeah.
You can do it, if you're sitting in traffic. It's a relatively simple one. On the plane, I teach people that on the plane a lot, because if there's turbulence and people sitting near me are freaking out, I will teach them that. Because most people will feel weird, doing this in public, tapping on their face in public. And I get it. So I teach them that. That's a good little cheater one.
Yeah.
And of course, the side of the hand is also a good little cheater one that you can easily do when no one's going to
Mhm.
really notice what you're
Mhm.
doing.
Absolutely. What do you see most often come up for people as core issues?
Ooh, I think that childhood wounds, of course, is really the number one. Obviously, that can look completely different in different people. We've all had all sorts of different childhood experiences, but I think that the way trauma impacts people is so variable,
Mhm.
right? And so some people have what we call in the field big T traumas, like the big ones, right? Like childhood sexual abuse, physical abuse, really big, witnessing domestic violence, witnessing neighborhood violence. These things are obviously big traumas. But for some people, a little t, what we would call a little t trauma, can impact their nervous system at the same level as other people get impacted by a big T trauma. So if you get left in the store by your parent when you're a little kid and you're lost for a half an hour until the clerks find your parents or whatever, that seems like and sounds like a little T trauma, but it could be such a big T trauma for that person and their nervous system that that could lead to all sorts of fears of abandonment, and then they're clingy in relationships, and then they are pushing people away all the time because of their clinginess, and it all roots back to this day of being lost in the store. And it seems like silly that it would be grow so big, but it can. And so that's one thing that I always tell my clients, just to have lots of compassion with yourself, because it could seem like something so small. Or I'll have clients say like, "Oh God, this issue again," because the same issue, we can tap on one aspect of it and it will get a little better, but it could rear its head up again in another way. And my philosophy is, if it's coming up, it's ready to be healed. So
Yes.
I always say to my client, like, if whatever drops in, if we're working on a present day issue of, like, right now I work with women with around relationships a lot, women in midlife who are divorced and dating again, and it's like, okay, so you keep dating the same guy over and over in a different body. Let's look at what that pattern is about, and we might date it back to something that happened with their dad early on, him being emotionally unavailable, and we can tap on one memory, one story, one piece of that, and things can get better. And then something else can come up around that with in the next guy and in the next guy. And it can feel like, oh, we're not making any progress. But I always like to say to my clients, like, think about it as like a spiral, right? Like we're going up a spiral staircase. You've reached this higher point. It feels like you're still stuck at this lower point because there's something familiar about it because we're dealing with the same issue, but you are evolved. You're not the same person that you were before you started this work
Yeah.
because you're constantly going up the work is never done,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. I know.
So I wrote in my book a story about remembering watching Louise Hay. For people who don't know her, she's a very famous self-help author, kind of like the
Mhm.
one who started the
Mhm.
whole
Yeah.
self-help movement, right? And she was just one of the most self-actualized people probably on this planet before she passed. And she was 79 years old and had done all this work on herself. And she was learning EFT for the first time with Nick Ortner. And I remember her saying to him, "This is so great. I'm going to start using this on all my issues." And my reaction was to be a little horrified because I was like, wait. Louise Hay, the queen of self help, still has issues at 79? Like, I was like, we're all doomed then. So, but upon further reflection, I was like, no, this is actually a really helpful reframe for me because it just shows that there is no destination healed.
Right.
There's no
Mhm.
destination full self-love. You're always going to have some self-doubt. You're going to grow and you're going to evolve and you're going to be a better person and feel more confident and have more self-love. But there's always going to be stuff because that's just life.
'Cause we're human,
Yeah,
right?
life is a journey, right? It's not a destination. It is a journey, legit. So I think like resisting embracing that idea actually causes a lot of suffering. And when you start to just embrace, like, it's just a journey, just more grist for the mill, just another issue. And now, by the way, I have this great tool to use on it.
Yeah.
Then it makes the whole healing personal growth process a lot easier and a lot more fun, honestly.
Yeah, and I like one of the things I like about EFT is that you can teach it to someone and there are aspects of it that they can do on their own. So it's not like for minor things they have to keep running back to a practitioner.
Yeah, I agree.
A lot of it is the work stuff, like you're headed into a meeting and you're nervous because you have to give a presentation. Perfect
Right.
time to head to the bathroom and do some tapping,
Yeah.
saying it quietly in your head, not
Right.
saying it out loud, I guess, but
Right. Right.
everyday instances like that, or like you were
Right.
saying, the traffic.
Right. You're stuck in traffic and you're late, let's say.
Mhm, mhm.
Well, you freaking out about being late isn't going to make you any less late. But
Exactly.
you tapping can make you feel more relaxed and I don't know, amazingly, I swear when you move into that more relaxed state, it's probably because you have more blood flow to your frontal lobe, but all of a
Mhm.
sudden things like solutions come
Yeah,
a lot of times to suddenly you'll see, oh, wait a minute, if I get
yeah,
off at this exit, I could maybe make it into, right? So I think that that's where it's really helpful to have that tool in your back pocket for that.
yeah.
One thing I do talk about in my book is there is a part of our brain called the reticular activating system.
Mhm,
And that is the part of our brains responsible for pattern identification. And so, like, if you're thinking about getting a new car and you're like, I might get a Jeep. And then all of a sudden you see Jeeps like everywhere, right? And
mhm.
you're like, were all these Jeeps here before? And I just didn't see them. And the answer is yes. All those Jeeps they didn't just materialize, but your brain was considering that unimportant. So it was
Right.
straining it out, right? And so it wasn't focusing on that. And when you start doing the tapping, not only are you getting that blood to the frontal lobe and you're thinking more clearly, but you're able to start to shift your reticular activating system to see different patterns. So like one thing I talk about a lot with my clients who are dating again is a lot of them will come to me and say, "Oh, there's no good men left out there. There's only jerks. I only date jerks. I only see, and that's their reticular activating system because there are good guys out there. There are jerks out there, 100%. But there are good guys out there too. But if they believe
Yeah,
at a deep level that there's only jerks, they're going to their reticular activating system is going to pick up on jerks around them, jerks in the store, jerks,
yeah,
in traffic and all that, and be like, oh, see, and that's that confirmation bias, right? That we do, and then we confirm what we believed already to be true, and so. When you start doing this tapping work, particularly on beliefs, this is where it's really helpful on beliefs, and you start questioning those beliefs that you thought were facts, you actually are also retraining your reticular activating system. So suddenly you see the guy carrying the lady's groceries out of the grocery store, and you're like, oh, there are nice men out there, so you suddenly start seeing them because you've essentially rewired your brain with the tapping.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've talked about reticular activating. I just call it RAS. That's
Yeah, the rest.
it's
Yeah,
easier to
exactly.
say, but
Yeah.
the whole point, just to remind people what it does, or the reason why it's blocking out certain things, is because we would be so overstimulated if we were actually conscious of everything that our body's taking in. So it's blocking certain smells and sights and things that we don't really need to pay attention to because we're trying to drive a car and we need to be focused on the road and the cars around us, not the plane flying overhead or whatever. So let's talk about your book and what prompted you to get started and write that.
Well, it is my story that got me started down that path, as you can imagine. So I went through a divorce in my early 40s. And, I don't think anybody ever gets married thinking they'll be single again. That's not the plan, right? So it's pretty jarring and disorienting. And so having to start dating again after 20 years and having to start dating again at midlife when everything is different. When you're in your 20s, pretty much everyone is single. And, and it's really easy to meet people, and people are interested in meeting new people. And by the time you're in your 40s or 50s, most people are coupled and most people are kind of doing the same thing with the same group of people all the time. And so it's just that's a really different experience. B, technology, right? So when I was in my 20s, there was barely cell phones. There was no online dating. That wasn't a thing. And so, now that is the thing. And so all of that change, um, I had to get my feet under me about it again and figure it out and go through it. And I made a group of friends with a bunch of other single women, and that was really great. And we all sort of taught each other things about dating. But one of the things I realized was that even though I had all this training, psychological training and working with individuals, I really didn't know much about couples psychology. So I sort of did a deep dive on that and kind of just looking at the research I found, my own experience of my own internal struggles, having to look for a partner again, and my friends and my clients. Then it's so funny, how life does this, but I started drawing in more single clients even before I wrote the book. And so just looking at everyone's experiences and learning from it and seeing what works in the dating world, what doesn't work, why do some people repeat the pattern of dating the same person in a different body, why do people settle for breadcrumbs instead of really being able to stand in their power and attract in a healthy partner. So all those things I just decided to pull together, and I knew I wanted to make it a book with tapping because I knew tapping worked. So I basically teach 8 different mindset shifts in the book, and each chapter has a tapping script with it so that someone could get started on clearing that
Perfect.
process. To your point, I do think you need a practitioner I have a practitioner that I work with, to
Yeah.
really dive into the deep stuff because a lot of this stuff is childhood related, but you can at least
Hmm.
start to
Yep.
feel more confident with the tapping scripts that are in the book.
Yeah. Awesome. Do you want to talk a little bit about what it means to date like a goddess?
Sure. That was the name came to me well before the book because I thought, wouldn't that be a great name for a book? Because the whole point is basically you're shifting your subconscious patterns to be able to stand in a really empowered, grounded place. And when you get there, that is when you're able to connect with someone intimately at a healthy level, because you're not going to let your boundaries be violated, and you're not going to settle for being treated less than you really desire. You're going to go after your desires. So the whole theory behind my book, and this is a theory some people don't like when they first come to find it out, because people just tell me what to say, just tell me what to text him back or
Yeah, and that's not
whatever.
how it
And it's like,
works.
it's not how it works. It's not how it works. When you shift on the inside into this more, what I call high vibe goddess kind of place, you magnetically attract in from the
Hmm.
outside the right person for you. And the more you do the work, the more and more you evolve. Or I was single for, I think, 8 years before the relationship I'm in now. And every guy, it got a little healthier and a little healthier and a little healthier. And, the guy I'm with now is like amazing and fantastic. And I don't think if I had met him at the beginning of those 8 years, I don't know that we would have been a match because my vibe, my subconscious patterns and programming were not the best. They were not healthy. And so I had to do the work to get to the point where then I could partner with a really healthy person.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
So beyond dating, how does your work help people with holistic transformation in other areas of their life?
Yeah, so I think that's the coolest thing about EFT tapping is that when you start working on one issue, everything gets better. Our brain has these neural connections and we don't even know exactly what they are, but you will start to see that if you're working on a fear of public speaking, your confidence around dating could grow, or your confidence around speaking up in your relationship, or whatever it is. So when you start to work on one thing, there's this domino effect that happens with the EFT tapping that really makes everything better. The more time you spend in a regulated state, in that alpha brainwave state, the more regulated as a whole you become. I know for me, I look back sometimes with chagrin around, wow, I was kind of a yeller with my kids when they were little. And I learned EFT tapping, luckily, when they were 7 and 9. And it got to a point pretty quickly into it. I suddenly realized, like, wow, I don't even yell anymore. I don't lose my temper with them. They were still doing the same annoying things kids do. But I was different. I was regulated. Things didn't bother me at the same level. And that's the goal, right? Is that nice, regulated, grounded, inner peace state that I truly believe tapping will bring you to.
Yes, absolutely. Is there anything we didn't talk about today that you would like to mention that you think is important for our listeners to hear?
We have so many maladaptive patterns that were put into us from childhood that EFT tapping is, to me, an unparalleled tool for clearing those up and clearing those up very quickly. And that is when everything on the outside starts to shift, is when you start to say, what are these beliefs that I'm having? What do I think I deserve? Am I willing to receive full love? Am I willing to receive full success and abundance? When you start asking those tough questions and tapping on those, that's when miracles really show up in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell our friends the different ways they could work with you.
My company's name is Inspired Life Tapping. So inspiredlifetapping.com, and that's my Facebook, my Instagram is all Inspired Life Tapping. I do individual sessions. I do a lot of group work. I'm working on a program right now called the Quit Him System, which is kind of what it sounds. It's all about quitting that toxic relationship.
Thank you so much for being here today. Always love chatting with another EFT practitioner.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It was really fun.
Thanks for watching. Let me know what your biggest takeaway was. Just drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe for more.